take what we actually typed in there and do something with that. So right now, yeah, we're handling this form being submitted, but we're not doing anything with what got typed in there. So let's fix that. So we saw that inside the function here, inside the event handler, that event object had something called a target, right? And the target was the thing that the event happened to, which in this case is the form. So rather than trying to get the form by saying document.querySelectorForm, or even grabbing the input directly using document querySelector input, I'd rather get it through the event object, because theoretically this same function could handle the submission of multiple forms, and I want to make darn sure that it's the form that was actually submitted. So by going through that event object to get to the form, you can be sure that it's the right form. Make sense? So let's again throw a debugger in there and have a look at what we got. JP5, Jurassic Park 5. All right. So I've got this event. The event has a target. The target is the form. The target then looks like elements. And that includes the input and the button. So we could get to the input that way. But we also gave our input a name. Not an ID, but a name. And if you do that, then you can get the form, which is event.target, and use its name to get the input. So if you give your input a name, you can get to it that way. Form dot that name. Now this gives us the actual input. What would happen if I said, okay, what line am I on here? Okay, I have const heading. Let's do this. Inside here, I'm going to make a variable called form. I'll call it F for form. That's another thing that if you're inside an event handler for form submission, everyone knows that F means form. Use good variable names, but to me, this is a totally acceptable variable name inside an event handler. Equals event.target. So that's the form that was submitted. Then we grab the heading. Then instead of changing text content to click, I'm just going to throw a debugger in there and we'll experiment. Okay, so now I've got the event as EV, I've got the form as F, and I've got the heading as heading. Let's unpause this and refresh. All right, here we go. Guardians of the Galaxy. In the console, I know I can say f.flickName, right? Yep, there's my input. So what if I set heading, which is there, right? Yep. Heading.textContent equals f.flickName. That ought to do it, right? Yeah. There is some difference. There can be more than one element on the page with the same name. And sometimes you need to do that. For example, radio button groups. You'll have more than one radio button with the same name because it's all one form control. And that name, it's called the control name. And that is what gets passed in when the form is submitted. It's the name, not the ID, that controls that. On elements other than form inputs, there's kind of no effective difference, and you can actually use the page fragments and links even to get to either one. But for forms, it is the name that controls how the data is submitted. So there is some difference, yeah. But they are both meant to identify things. So radio button groups are the most obvious case where you'll notice the difference. So what happens if I say heading.textContent equals f.flickName? Anybody try this? Object HTML input element. Cool. That's just exactly what I meant. So what did I do? I changed the text content to something that wasn't text. I didn't change it to what I typed in here. I changed it to the actual input. Since that doesn't make any sense for text content, JavaScript helpfully converts it to a string for us. And unfortunately, the way that an HTML input element gets converted to a string is it gets converted to the string square bracket object HTML input element square bracket. Not what we wanted. So it turns out what you type into an input is not the actual input element. It's the input element's value. So the element has a property called value that is whatever you typed in there. So that's what we want to change the heading's text content to. f.flickname.value. There we go. So heading dot text input, or what am I doing? Text content equals f.flickname.value. So you see how it's kind of handy to use the debugger to experiment with something if you're not exactly sure how to do it. It's nice to be able to kind of fiddle around with things before you. That's a lot faster than just going back and forth, make a change, refresh, make a change, refresh. Using a debugger can be really helpful for experimentation. So let's see, what other messes of Chris's we have? Wonder Woman had that other Chris guy, that Pine fellow, in a very small role. I guess it was a kind of a decent role, but yeah, whatever. He's boring. Wonder Woman, all right, there we go. Totally works. Look at this. This is a very useful app all of a sudden, isn't it? Very, very useful. Parks and Rec. Totally counts. TV show has a Chris in it. Jurassic Parks and Rec. Is that a parody that someone's made on YouTube yet? That's a missed opportunity. Okay. Someone had to have done that. Way too obvious. All right. So, hey, we did a thing. So, to commit, I'm just going to click on my little Git icon here. I can see the changes that I've made. If I wanted to just stage this thing before I commit it, I could hit the little plus. See, it even tells me stage changes. There we go. Now that's a stage change. But you can do it all in one step from here. And what did we do? On the subject of commit messages and making them good, it's also nice if they all kind of follow the same format. And probably the companies you're going to work for are going to have a standard as far as this goes. It's kind of common to have a style guide of sorts. And both Google and GitHub use the same style for their commit messages, and it's the one I like too. It's nice to go with what the community has kind of settled on. So make your commit messages imperative sentences. That is, complete sentences that are commands. You can make them answer or complete the sentence, this commit will. So write them present tense, not past tense. So I'm not going to say updated the heading. I'm going to say update the heading. This commit will update the heading. So this commit will update the heading with text from the form. Update the heading with text from the form. I'm also trying to make sure that this tells me what's different from the one before, because we've been updating the heading in the last several commits. What's different about this one is it updates it with what we actually typed in the form. So type in my commit message, I can hit Command Enter or Control Enter, and now it's committed, but it's still only on my laptop. If my desk leaps into the air, flips upside down, and lands on top of my laptop, I will lose it. So let's make sure that we also push. Cool. And that's the homework.